What is up, everybody? It's Revv time. Today I want to talk about modulation, and more specifically where it should be placed. I mean, there's no set rules for where you would put a modulation effect in a signal chain. So, when you think modulation, you think, chorus, univibe, tremolo, phaser, flanger, all that stuff is modulation. And where you put it in a signal chain, especially when it applies to overdrive or distortion, fuzz, any clipped signal, is kind of to his or her own. But at the same time, for me, I tend to gravitate towards having any sort of clipped signal, overdriven signal, anything like that before my modulation effects. And the reason I would prefer that is when you run like a chorus, especially into an overdrive, something that's clipping or distorting, you're sending a signal that's already doing some crazy stuff. It's being modulated, and then that modulated signal is now being clipped, and it can get a little out of control. And like I said, sometimes that sounds better. I think a univibe pedal sounds really cool into the front end of either an overdriven amp or an overdrive pedal. But I'm not as fond of, like a chorus effect or even a Leslie effect like I'm using right now, like a rotary style effect. For me, I still tend to prefer overdrive into that first. So I thought, just as an example, maybe take a listen to what's going on here. So what what I was playing, or what you were hearing while I was playing, was my tilt overdrive into the Strymon Lex, which is a rotary effect, and that's how it sounds. It sounds really cool. It sounds great. I've got another tilt overdrive dialed really similar on the other side of the Strymon, so we can just kind of hear an A-B. So let's listen to this for a second with the tilt into the Lex. So right away what I'm hearing, and you guys let me know in the comments below what you're hearing, but with the Lex running into the overdrive, it sounds a little, it still sounds rotary, but there's a lot of anomalies in there because of that moving signal running into the overdrive, especially if I dig into single notes, as opposed to it's a little, I guess, kind of out of control sounding to me. It still sounds cool. I think the tonality, as far as just doing kind of the bluesy, I think that sounds good. On this side, I'm hearing more of like that kind of resin from, the horn on like the Leslie cab, and less over here. I prefer the way this sounds. Now, also keep in mind that even chorus pedals, a lot of modulation pedals have kind of their own EQ to them. So an EQ before an overdrive is going to sound different than an EQ after. So you have to keep that in mind. This has its own, especially in the horn level control, it's got kind of its own EQ range to it as well. So on this side, even though the pedals are dialed the same, on this side it's going to sound different because not only is it being hit with a modulated signal, but it's also hearing now that EQ. So it's it's another kind of thing to keep in mind when you're deciding how you want to do this. Playing softer, this sounds pretty cool, but when I dig in, it's a little bit harder to wrangle. So that's a really good example. Now, this would apply, honestly, I'm having a pedal board built, so all my chorus stuff, everything's gone. So I do have this here. It's a modulation effect. It's not a chorus, but really the same rule applies, like I said, to pretty much any modulation pedal. Now, I will say that I prefer a univibe to the front end of an overdrive. It just sounds cool. It's the Trower thing and the Hendrix thing. That sounds great, but for the most part, I prefer overdrive into modulation. Now, the other question that would come up is, should I put modulation in the effects loop of an amplifier? And to me, it's really kind of the same rule. It's the reason you're going to put a modulation effect into the effects loop of an amplifier is because you want it after the preamp. So, for me, if I'm using like the Revv 120, which is a channel switching amp, it's all channel gain, I'm not going to want to run my modulation effects to the front end of the amplifier because the second I turn on an overdrive, it's going to get pretty out of control sounding. So I'm going to want those modulation effects in the effects loop so that they're post preamp and then into the power amp. So it's really, think of it really the same exact way. Do I want overdriven signal into a modulation effect or do I not want that? And that really kind of dictates whether or not you would put that in the effects loop. Of course, the other question would be where, should I put modulation effects before reverbs and delays or after? Once again, no set rules. For me, I always want modulation effects before my reverbs and delays. And that's just because I prefer not to have my delay get modulated with my chorus effect. I dial the chorus for the guitar, and sometimes it sounds really cool to have the delay modulated by the same chorus, but for the most part, at least for me, that can get a little out of control. I usually prefer to have a delay that allows me to do modulation within the delay, so I can just slightly modulate a delay as opposed to having it be, chorused or even tremolo, flange, all that stuff. And like I said, for an effect, it's really cool, but for me, I prefer having reverbs and delays be post or after my modulation effects. So let me know in the comments below what you guys were hearing. And especially if you're able to listen on, studio monitors or maybe some in-ears, this may not translate as well on maybe, iPhone or laptop speakers. But yeah, let me know what you heard and what you think. And also, how do you guys use, your modulation effects and where do you place them in the signal chain? It's always really interesting to me. And as always, I really appreciate you guys tuning in. Please hit that like button and subscribe. It helps keep the channel going and growing. And yeah, we'll see you next time.